I always say, whoever would have imagined in my craziest, wildest dreams this little Dutch boy could create such a ruckus.
Edward Lodewijk van Halen was born on January 26, 1955 in Amsterdam, Holland. Together with his parents Eugenie and Jan, as well as his older brother Alex, Edward grew up in a town called Nijmegen, further east in the Netherlands, close to the German border.
Jullie zijn in Nederland geboren? Waar?
Hier in Amsterdam. We hebben in Nijmegen opgegroeid.
According to Edward, his mother was treated like a second-class citizen in Holland due to her Indonesian background and ethnicity. Eugenie had relatives in the USA, and the family heard stories about what life was like across the Atlantic.
The reason we came to this country is because my mom's side of the family all moved here, and they said, "Oh man, you can pick the oranges from the trees, and it's a land of opportunity." You know, we said, "Okay, what the hell? Let's sell everything and leave."
Eugenie and Jan van Halen, as it was originally pronounced, thus decided to move to America with their two sons, setting sail at the end of February 1962, when Alex was 8 years old and Edward had recently turned 7.
We came to America 9 days on the boat.
From Holland to New York. My father was in the band on the boat.
And that was our ticket over here.
And my brother and I also played piano during intermission.
Having arrived in New York on March 9, 1962, the Van Halens soon made their way to California. Settling in Pasadena, not far from Los Angeles, the family struggled to adapt to life in America and to make ends meet.
Coming here with approximately $50 and a piano, not being able to speak the language, it was rough.
I knew a couple of words. Yes, no, motorcycle, and accident.
Edward's father, who had been a classically trained professional musician in Europe, now had to find other ways of making a living in their new home. He washed dishes at Arcadia Methodist Hospital and had to walk 3 miles to work as a janitor at a Masonic temple. Meanwhile, for the two brothers, adapting to school life in a new country presented a major challenge.
It was beyond frightening. I don't even know how to explain. Since we couldn't speak the language, we were considered a minority. Alex and I were outcasts, which actually probably made us closer because we had to stick together.
Edward and Alex had already begun playing music in Holland, though not the kind that would eventually make them famous.
It was my mom who cracked the whip. If you're gonna follow your dad's footsteps, it better be respectable and you're gonna play classical piano.
I never learned how to read music, and I fooled the teacher. I was just blessed with good ears. I'd watch his fingers and emulate what he did.
I remember being forced to do these annual contests, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12 years old. And I actually won first prize every year without knowing how to read.
Eventually, Jan would start earning some extra money by playing on weekends, often taking his two sons with him, playing at venues like the Continental Club on Cahuenga Boulevard in Hollywood.
What saved us was my dad gigging on the weekends, making music.
And my dad had a band called the Rhythmaires. He would take us along the clubs, and you get the feel of what music is really all about.
Edward and Alex had already formed their first band by this point, the Broken Combs, with fellow brothers Brian and Kevin Hill, as well as childhood friend Don Ferris.
We wrote our own songs, believe it or not. I play piano, my brother plays saxophone. We played at lunchtime at Hamilton Elementary School.
As time went on, though, it was clear that the two brothers' interests lay in a different form of music than the one their mother had hoped for.
And then we discovered the Beatles and Dave Clark 5, and when you heard Glad All Over, boom, 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 immediately we said, okay, enough piano. Like any kid, we wanted to rock and roll.
Originally, it was Edward who bought a drum kit while Alex played flamenco guitar.
I had a paper route to pay for the kit. It cost like $125 or something like that. And while I was out throwing the papers, Al played the drums, and he got better than me.
So I said, take my damn drums, I'll play your guitar. Worked out for the best.
Having traded instruments with his older brother, Edward maintained that he wasn't instantly a virtuoso on the guitar and that playing it was always something he had to work hard at.
When I first picked up the guitar, there was no light bulb moment or message from God. Some parts came easy and some parts were hard, but I never thought about it that way.
I would sit there hours on end, not go to parties, not do anything, except lock myself in my room and play guitar. Alex would go out with his old lady and come back at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd still be up playing.
I would make mistakes, and
I would ask my dad, what do you do? And he goes, in Dutch, he'd say, gewoon doorfietsen, which means just keep pedaling through, don't stop, and don't let the audience know you made a mistake. Or smile and do it twice, then people will think you meant it.
At 1881 Las Lunas Street, the sounds got louder and the hours spent playing grew longer. It was clear that playing guitar was becoming far more to Edward Van Halen than simply a hobby.
Guitar really means a lot more to me than an instrument. It's part of me, period. Playing guitar always helped me through emotional, bummed out times. I just looked at it and I said, this piece of wood could never hurt me.
At a time in his youth where he didn't quite fit in and nothing seemed certain, music became an escape, a companion, and a way of life.
Well, I was too small to play football. Junior high, I was on football team, and I already played guitar, and so I quit the football team.
I started playing because I was just your typical insecure person. Being jerked around by girlfriends or people at school, this and that. It sounds stupid. I felt lonely, so I started playing guitar. I just kind of fell into it. I didn't know what else to do except play guitar.
Although his increasing devotion to this new musical outlet was clear, it wasn't met with unanimous support.
The whole time I was growing up, whenever I didn't practice piano, or when I started playing guitar, my mom used to call me a nothing nut, just like your father. When you grow up that way, it's not conducive for self-esteem.
Despite this lack of approval from one member of the family, Edward's musical expression was still largely confined to the house and garage, and developed alongside the person with whom he would play for life.
When I first learned to play guitar, it would just be Alex and me.
I depend on Alex. I really do. It sounds hokey, but I love him so much. Even if he wasn't my brother, he would be my best friend. I can't play with another drummer, to tell you the truth. I really can't. We're definitely connected.
Soon, the brothers would begin to play in front of audiences and earn their first paychecks as professional musicians. But for now, their musical endeavors remained a family affair.
As we grew a little bit older, then we started to play with my dad's band. We'd play at country clubs, and then at a place called the Alpine House in San Fernando, we'd wear the lederhosen. Everything from oompa music to waltzes to, weddings, bar mitzvahs, you name it.
So Ed and I started to play, and my dad says, hey, I think I should pass the hat. So we're done playing, and the money is counted, $22. Then my dad gives Ed $5, and he gives me $5. And I'm looking at Ed and going, where's the rest of the money? So we're looking at my dad, and he says, welcome to the music business.
Around this time, one particular incident set in motion a habit that would plague Edward in the decades that followed. Before long, playing music and drinking alcohol would become intertwined.
I started drinking when I was 12. My dad gave me a shot of vodka and a cigarette after a German Shepherd bit me. I started drinking and smoking all in one day, right then and there. I also drank every time we played with my dad's band to calm my nerves. I get real nervous playing in front of people, and it was like a miracle drug.
Though he sought help to perform in public, Edward's skills were rapidly improving, and one guitarist in particular stood out from others as an influence.
Eric Clapton is the only guitarist that I ever copied licks from. I learned everything, like note for note.
Slow hand, man, he was great.
But emulating Clapton's style could only take him so far. Edward still needed the right tools to reach the heights he desired. First, his father Jan helped him buy a gold-top Gibson Les Paul on credit, followed by a discovery that would stay with him until the end.
I used to work at a music store delivering pianos and organs, and one day a Marshall amp comes in. Only Eric Clapton, gods play these. I said, I gotta have that amp. And I ended up using that same one on our first 6 records.
Now armed with a professional level setup, Edward soon looked to forge his own path. Moving away from his early influences and firmly avoiding established style and theory.
After Cream, I basically stopped listening to music altogether. I didn't listen to much of anything.
Anything that someone wrote
that's supposed to set some kind of, this is the way you're supposed to do it, makes me gag. I wouldn't do the weird stuff I do on guitar if I took lessons.
Instead of reading a book, I wrote my own, so to speak.
As the 1960s turned to the 70s, equipment improved, technique was perfected, an embryonic band started to form around Edward and Alex Van Halen. Trojan Rubber Company, also known as the Space Brothers, with friends Dennis Travis and Bill Maxwell, was one, and eventually there was Genesis, a power trio with bassist Mark Stone. After hearing of another more established group with the same name across the Atlantic, a change became necessary.
So we became Mammoth. That was Alex, Mark Stone, and me. That's when I used to lead sing.
And I got tired of singing. I couldn't stand that shit.
I actually first heard about Eddie and Alex when I was in a band called Snake. There was a carnival that our high school would have every year. Eddie was doing the lead singing. They were playing Cream, and I remember thinking, wow, check this guitarist out. He's playing the stuff note for note.
Another future member of Van Halen had already become aware of the brothers' musical progression back in 1970.
I knew the Van Halens when we were seniors in high school. We were crosstown rivals.
Roth was in a band called Red Bull Jet, and Ed and I could not stand the motherfucker. We couldn't stand the band, we couldn't stand the music.
Despite the rivalry, David Lee Roth had taken note of the Van Halen's musicianship and had even made an approach to the band in 1971.
So we had Roth audition. We were in my parents' house, and I'm telling you, he couldn't sing for shit. No, seriously. And I just said, sorry, man. And he walked off in a huff and a puff, and that was it.
Though he'd been rejected as a singer for Genesis, Roth remained in the Van Halen's orbit, regularly renting out his PA equipment to Mammoth and lobbying for another chance to sing.
And this went on for a few months, and eventually I just said to Ed, look, you're not really capable of being the front man and singing. I said, Ed, rather than paying Roth this $10 every time he rent his stuff, why don't I just get him in the band, and we won't have to pay him $10, and we'll have a lead singer.
To me, it was instantly apparent I was exactly what this band needed.
I gotta hand it to him, he was rather unique. He walked around with a certain confidence.
From the outside looking in, it might have appeared to be an odd pairing. I'm more of a jeans and t-shirt guy, and Dave was dressed like David Bowie. But he was the only guy we knew who was as serious as we were about music.
Roth and Edward were now both bandmates and classmates at Pasadena City College. And while the musical appreciation may not have been mutual at first, the singer was inspired to improve his act and performance by looking toward Mammoth's guitarist.
I listened to him play, I watched him play, and I said, you know what he does with his hands, I want to do with my feet. I want to do with my voice. He was kind of a mentor of mine.
Right from the group's beginnings, however, the clash of musical styles that would come to define Van Halen through the years was already there to be seen.
The Van Halens were all Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple. The only thing white I wanted to hear was the drummer and Sly and the Family Stone. And it was a perfect balance.
There's always a certain amount of friction in a band. If you have four members and they all like the identical thing, you're gonna have no versatility. Together, it made a soup.
They were playing great music, of course. Eddie is incendiary, just wow. But nobody could dance to their stuff. And I said to them, when you play guitar, you do like this, but you ain't gonna get any girls like that. You got to get kind of smooth.
My brother used to throw drumsticks at me. Move, jump around. I was afraid to move the way I felt like moving. I would try and move the way I was supposed to. Hi, I'm a rock star, I'm a lead guitarist.
Musical differences weren't the only issue for the fledgling lineup. A short time after Roth joined, a cease and desist order arrived from another Southern California group who went by the name Mammoth, forcing the quartet to find something new.
I think the original name that they wanted was Rat Salad, which was the name of a Black Sabbath song. Well, let's make something that's going to have some longevity to it, that has a little bit of shadow and a little mystery. You're not sure what a Van Halen is.
And he said, look, Van Halen sounds nice, it's different, it's your last name, and it can be a good band name.
By 1973, Edward Van Halen had graduated high school, formed a band that bore his family name, and had already decided that music was to be his future. Taking this road, however, wouldn't come without sacrifices.
It really hit me like a brick wall when I graduated high school, and you signed everybody's yearbook, and everybody asked you, so what college you going to? Hey Al, I think we better stick to what we know.
We watched all of our friends go to college, get their lives started. We spent 5.5 years wondering, 5.5 years of constant, endless practice.
It was small steps. It wasn't this big dream that we had. It was basically the need to survive.
While the commitment to music was clear in Roth, Edward, and Alex, keyboardist Jim Pusey, who had played with the brothers for about a year, would depart, and bassist Mark Stone was torn between rock and roll and academic achievement.
I was like split between these two things, and basically I just couldn't keep up.
I'll never forget playing at the Velasco's party, which was like a semi-weekly bash that we'd play. I remember Mark's parents came, and they just take him home in the middle of a song.
Yeah, because we were a bad influence on him.
It was tough leaving that band, because I knew they were destined for greatness. It's just like they say, don't leave before the miracle happens, and I did.
It didn't take long to find a replacement, however. Michael Anthony Sobolewski had previously loaned his band Snake's PA to the brothers after Van Halen's equipment had broken down during a show at Pasadena High School. His generosity, as much as his playing, hadn't been forgotten.
I got a call from Eddie and Alex one night. They asked me to come over and jam with them. We jammed and jammed, and they put me through every kind of beat change they could think of. And when we were through playing, they asked me if I'd like to join the band. And my mouth kind of opened up a little bit, and I went, sure.
As much as his ability to fill in musically, Van Halen could see the potential in what their new bassist could add vocally.
We were all tripped out. Mikey was lead singing for his band, Dave was fronting his own band, and I was too. And we all just kind of got together.
Mike Anthony was so unique. His bass playing, yeah, we can find bass players, but nobody sounds like that. That's Garfunkel. Simon's good, but Simon and Garfunkel.
Thus, the classic Van Halen lineup was solidified, but still, a breakthrough remained elusive.
Nobody wanted anything to do with Van Halen. For a good 7 years, we knocked on everybody's door, and everybody just said no. So what we did was we started taking it straight to the people.
Playing everywhere and anywhere. From backyard parties to places the size of your bathroom, everything.
We printed our own flyers and stuffed lockers at high schools. We played we played everywhere. Whether you liked us or not, you definitely had heard of us.
Building a committed local following, the group started to get a reputation for the rowdiness of their shows.
I'll never forget, we played a backyard party once. It was written up in the paper. 19 people got busted and stuff. And
4 cop cars were turned over.
A group of guys took one cop, they took his handcuffs and handcuffed him around a tree.
Though the quartet still mostly managed themselves, and despite their share of moments and gigs where things didn't work, the band's momentum and the size of the local audience gradually but steadily grew.
Slowly, we built an audience of about 3,000 to 5,000 people.
We would promote our own shows at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. We really tried to build up a following rather than look for a record contract.
We just humped it and humped it and humped it until people came.
We'd say if the following is there, then at some point somebody's going to have to stand up and take notice of the band.
Eventually, someone did. Van Halen had already made their debut on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, landing some gigs at the less heralded club Gazzari's, where one night they were spotted by known Los Angeles tastemaker and DJ Rodney Bingenheimer.
We just kept playing, doing our civic shows, and then Rodney Bingenheimer saw us and said, shit, you guys are all right. Why don't you play at Starwood?
Though they now had some of LA's hottest music clubs within reach, by 1976, Van Halen was clearly no overnight success story. For their 21-year-old guitarist, however, there was never a doubt about whether he'd made the right career choice or what the group meant to him.
I always thought Van Halen was going to be something special. To me, Van Halen was special when we played backyard parties. Right from the very beginning, even when we were nobody, it was the main part of my life.
if you will, from Pasadena, ladies and gentlemen, Van Halen!
Despite having conquered the San Gabriel Valley backyard party scene, by 1976, Edward Van Halen still had doubts about whether he, his brother, and the band that bore their name could ever make a living out of playing music.
I'll tell you, man, the hardest part was before we got signed. My mother and father used to tell Alex and I, get a job, have something to fall back on. Here I am, 21 years old, going, oh God, Al, what are we gonna do?
From the very beginning, Ed and I knew what we wanted to do, and we put everything into it.
That meant breaking out of the high school and local scene and heading for Hollywood. The less trendy club Gazzari's was the first regular gig for the band, but that meant playing as the background music to some unusual events.
Remember Wet T-shirt contest?
Oh, yeah.
It went in very short little stages, like one day I'm going to be the king of Gazzari's. Right. One day we'll be the top guys at the Starwood.
A whole different island, the Hollywood scene. You know, it was like litter and platform shoes and all that stuff. So we almost had to like build our own following again playing out in Hollywood.
One of the many obstacles the band faced in those days was how loudly they played, especially the earth-shaking volume of Edward's 100-watt Marshall amps.
I hate to bring up Spinal Tap, but while they're going to 11, at the time I was already going to 15.
I used to get kicked out of so many clubs, you know, because I refused to turn down.
Nah, your guitarist is too psychedelic, too loud, and too much uncontrolled energy, and blah, 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 blah. But we believed in ourselves, and we wouldn't take no for an answer.
While the band remained determined, the musical landscape of the mid to late 70s presented another challenge.
Being a rock and roll band in 1977 is kind of what it's like today, except back then it was punk and disco that was dominating the charts.
If you wanted to play like Gazzari's or any of these places, you had to play a lot of that material.
See, this is where Roth was good, because he was very in tune as to what the audience would like to dance to.
Hey, what about this one? Whoa, 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 whoa. You're gonna be going home alone, you play that one for money. No. Most of that stuff you can't dance to, but wait. You can dance to that one.
Man, did we play a lot of different stuff. Everything from Cool in the Gang, Get Down Tonight, to Smoke on the Water.
Gazzari's was the college of musical knowledge for Van Halen.
The band's set lists were huge and diverse, though different accounts vary on exactly how many songs they knew.
And we ultimately had a set of some 200 songs.
We had a repertoire of like 300 different songs.
They had like a repertoire of, I don't know, like 400 songs.
For Edward in particular, this requirement to recreate the disco hits of the Billboard chart was far from straightforward.
In the club days, we had to play top 40 to get to gigs, and it was impossible for me to emulate these records.
I remember you guys going, why can't you make it sound like the damn record? I'm going, sorry.
But it was also a blessing in disguise, because no matter what I played, it sounded like me. And that's why whenever you hear Van Halen, you know it's Van Halen, because that's all we can do.
As they moved from Gazzari's to more fashionable clubs, the band's visibility increased, more original songs were worked into the set, and in November 1976, one notable figure was there to witness something he instantly knew was special.
I discovered Van Halen at the Starwood. They were opening up for a group called The Boys, who I was really there to see.
And then I heard this astonishing sound. It just sounded like 3 or 4 guitar players all playing at the same time. What is that? And I went to the front and I saw this guy tapping away on his guitar, which I'd never seen before. When I was a kid and I heard Jimi Hendrix for the first time, I just went, okay, Earth has changed. Not since Jimi Hendrix has anybody had that effect.
And I offered to fly them to New York to Electric Lady Studios and produce their demo, which I did, 15 songs. And I brought them in to Bill Aucoin, our then manager, and the rest of the band, and nobody else believed it. So I tore up the contract and I said, guys, love you. I'm a big fan. Go and get him.
It was really depressing. We were totally bummed. Gene gave us a couple $100 to make our way home, and we just kept playing the Whiskey and the Starwood.
While this latest rejection left Edward reeling, 3 months later, a tip-off from local booking agent Marshall Burrell to Warner Brothers Records would change everything.
Warner Brothers Records, how may I help you?
The president of Warner Brothers came down and saw us playing in a bar one night. We were playing for free, and he came with our producer, Ted Templeman.
It was 99-cent beer night, and 3 people were in the audience, and 2 of them were Mo and Ted.
Van Halen was playing. There was nobody in there. It was like 5 people, but they were playing like they were in a coliseum. The energy, and Ed just nailed me. Oh my God, it was like falling in love with a girl. The best musician I'd ever seen in my life. Right away I told Mo, we gotta sign these guys. You know, I've never heard a guitar player like that in my life. He's doing these hammer-ons and stuff. Whew.
There he was, and he said, hey, it's great, man. And within a week we were signed. Just right out of the movies.
Right out of the movies, the miracle had finally happened. After years of struggle, fame and fortune awaited Van Halen. For Edward, however, only just turned 22. The dream had really always been something simpler than that.
What I dreamt was that we would be famous. Not that I'd walk down the street and everyone would go, hey, that's him. But famous in a way that people like the music we make. So finally, after years of fighting for it, we had the chance to do that.
We didn't have a clue, really, but what got us to getting a record deal is we believed in ourselves, and we wouldn't take no for an answer.
The reason I signed them was because of Ed, because of his ability. I didn't really care about anybody else. I just wanted that genius to be recognized by the world.
Ted was completely just knocked out by the way Ed played, and well, the next day we signed. We were just babes in the woods. We knew nothing about nothing. So we signed the worst deal for us that you can ever imagine.
They called it a Motown deal.
Okay.
Now, we had an 11-point deal, and 3 points went to Ted, our producer.
The producer.
Okay?
Ted still makes more money than I do on those first 2.
Oh yeah, he makes more than all of us.
But he's still Ted.
As long as I get paid, that's all I care about. So the reason I signed them was because of Ed, but then I realized that the band were a great cohesive unit.
We took a very simple approach to the whole thing. It was not as if we were to sit down and say, okay, let's write a song. It was, let's go and play.
We all piece it together. I mean, Alan, my brother's great at arranging. It's a group thing, but without me, it wouldn't be. It's always comes from me. I'm the spark plug in the agent. So it is kind of a burden, but it's a challenge at the same time.
We all used to bring pieces of music into the basement, and I remember when Ed brought in Running with the Devil. That chord structure and that whole deal, the moment I heard that, I said, okay, Ed, you're writing all the songs from now on, because we can't compete with that. It was just absolutely brilliant to my ear. It was amazing.
Came talking about love. The whole song came together within about 5 minutes. Ed had the music, and we just played, and Roth would sing to it, and if it was good, we'd keep it.
He talked about love was such a stupid thing to us, 2 chords, hey, we were making fun of punk.
Even before the first record, we had so much material that at that point, it's like, just kind of picking and choosing from that stuff.
Before we went into the studio to do the first album, we did a demo tape for Warner Brothers, with Ted and Don. We put that 30 songs in 2 days, and out of that, picked songs for the first album.
Tone is one of the most important things about this band.
It's my voice. All kinds of guitarists used to come and snoop around and see what the hell I was doing, but it was pretty basic, really. It was just turn all the way up.
I play very loud in the studio because I like to feel it, like the arm mirrors move. But see, there's a difference between loud and this thing I call a warm brown sound, or a warm, rich, tony sound.
A lot of it has to do with the way I play, that you can't remove it whether you like it or not.
Ed used to call it sound chasing. Our instrument is our voice. This is how we connect with the world. And Ed and I had a running battle with every engineer, producer, just to get to where we wanted to go.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We never knew much about recording
overdubbing. That's why when we did our first album, I said, hey Ted, I've never done overdub. Can I just play live? So I did, and Ted freaked out. He's going, whoa, it doesn't even need another guitar.
I was nailed. But what got me, in addition to that, his musical sensibility was pop. So as a technician, I'd never heard that before. His technical ability, but in also just his overall sound that he already had there.
The only thing we did overdub was the backing vocals.
We had no keyboard, we had no pumping brass section, so what are we gonna do to add a little color to the chorus? We'll sing. Okay, let's get some harmonies going here, which to this day is fairly rare in big rock sound. You'll hear a lot of vocals stacked up in unison. It's kind of a gang thing. We say we want wild. This kind of thing. But as far as 4 and 5 part harmonies and things like this is the Temptations played to the background of Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin.
No auto-tuning, no reverb.
They had their own commerciality there.
Where was the album recorded? Oh, Sunset Sound. I like that room. Just a big room. It's like our basement, actually. Beer cans all over the floor, pinks, hot dog smears all over the place. But in order for us to be comfortable, it's got to be, just do what we want.
They were young, and the first time in the studio, older, you come in, it's like, okay, here we go again. But these guys were just so happy to be in the studio. It was so cute, and the energy was great,
The band always did its best when we were just allowed to walk in and play, and record the band while they're playing. So it was like a snapshot of the time.
They came in and banged out that record in I think 5 days. Yeah.
The first one.
The first one.
We already were pretty much who we were, because that's why it only took us a week to record the first record. We just went in and played.
With Van Halen, I don't perform with them, but I go and I watch their shows and I see what they want to get across live, and I really incorporate that into what I do in the studio. My job is sort of just try to make the artist sound good, and make them sound like themselves.
Everything was basically done the first second day.
The music, I'd say, took a wheel, including Jamie's Crying, which we wrote in the studio. And my guitar solo.
Everybody's going, oh, Eddie Van Halen didn't invent tapping, and I never claimed that I did, but I do know how and when I figured out how to do it. Alex and I used to go to every concert at the Forum in LA, and Led Zeppelin's playing, and Jimmy Page is going like this.
I saw somebody do this years ago,
He's got his hand in the air, and I'm going.
So I just go, wait a minute, man, this thing right here, I can just use my finger, like a capo. Go. And it's like...
This finger, or these two, or however many you want to use, is just an extension of this hand.
Am I being stupid?
No.
When did you first hit upon your guitar playing technique, the tap technique?
Probably around 74, 75.
Was Eruption something you had been playing live?
Yeah. I think it was around the end of the Uzari days.
Had you ever heard of anybody else doing anything like that?
No, honestly, no. I'm sure people have, but I've never seen anyone.
So the technique that I originally called nailing, but it ended up being called tapping by Eddie Van Halen.
Brian may get a little pulling out. Better remember.
This is the solo from It's Late. This uses some hammering on technique, which I never pursued very far, but for instance, Eddie Van Halen has pursued a long way and made something completely different out of it, really.
One area where you're noted as a pioneer is the two-handed fretboard tapping.
In later years, after I started doing it, a few years, Van Halen actually came in before he was ever big and saw me doing it at the Whiskey, and that's where he picked it up from.
This story about you going to see Harvey Mandel at the Starwood with him, is that how it worked?
Yeah. You know, we all love Can't Heat. They're cool. And Harvey Mandel did this little kind of interlude with the tapping thing. We both kind of looked at each other and went, whoa, that really stood out. I believe that's when he added it to his bag of tricks.
I took lessons from Harvey in 1975 and 6 and just tried to pick up anything that he was doing. So I started doing that hammering stuff. Once a week we'd get together. He saw me putting my hands down on the board. It wasn't that he learned that from me, it's that he saw me using that technique, but I was more the Harvey Mandel style, whereas when Everett picked it up, it kind of turned into eruption.
I'm sure someone else has done that before me. It's just they didn't think of applying it to rock and roll the way I did.
I never really heard anybody do with it what I did, which is actual pieces of music.
You know, Eruption wasn't really planned to be on the record. Me and Al were taking around rehearsing for a show. We had to do it in the Whiskey. So I was warming up, practicing my solo, and Ted walks in. He goes, "Hey, what's that?"
They might play something that they don't even remember they played. And I'll say, "What about that?" And they'll say, "Oh yeah, that? No, that's nothing." And it turns out something that's really great, Eddie especially.
That's a little solo thing I do live. And he goes, "Yeah, it's great, put it on the record."
I think of myself as a lighting man when I produce records. I just try to make people look good. I wanted the world to see Ed play, That's it. That's the only reason.
Eddie changed the face of guitar, period. I don't think anybody's had as much an influence since Jimi Hendrix.
We realized the impact he was having then, when he first hit the scene.
When Eddie came out, he just bam, just like, he didn't knock the board out, he just completely destroyed it.
There are no rules in music. There's just cause and effect. And I think he understood that more than most people.
When we were kids, we used to listen to that first Van Halen record, and it was just insane. It was like...
We listened to the album, Van Halen 1. It was like somebody dropped a f***ing bomb,
Not since Jimi Hendrix had there been a guitar player that had so much impact. It was so inspiring to me.
Eddie, listening to his playing, it really different. It was a great style and a great band.
Influenced anybody after him, and definitely whether they ever admitted it or not, all the guys before him, Brian had said it, when they heard that first album, they all quietly went like, what?
I was just like, wow. Like, how does anyone do that? What has he got that is so magical?
I'm still trying to figure out how I did it on the record, because when I got to the top, I made a mistake. Even I can't reproduce it.
That's the tapping, or I don't even know what they call this stuff. I didn't call it anything. The sounds on that record were a lot of years of experimentation and tearing apart guitars and opening up amplifiers and getting electrocuted and kicked around. And
there's a vibe on the record, I think, to me, because we kept it real live.
Yeah, I guess it was Ted's idea all along to make it come off as pure and simple and honest as it is live. I wasn't sure. I mean, by the time Donnie got through it, I was going, wow. Yeah, I really liked it.
My satisfaction is when I hear it and it's done and they're happy with it, or if I get a call from Eddie Van Halen saying, hey, it really came out great. That really makes me feel good,
Well, that's the beauty of Ted Templeman, is that he brings out the artist as opposed to stamping his name on it.
See the very first album cover that Warner Brothers designed for us. It looked just like The Clash or whoever. But we said,
this shit. We came up with the logo ourselves. There's nothing wrong with pop band. Hey, we're just a rock and roll band. Don't try and slot us in with the Sex Pistol thing just because it's happening.
Rock and roll was not at the forefront at all on the charts or anything. But whenever music is out there, there's always room for more.
Was it your idea to release You Really Got Me as a single?
Kind of bummed me out because Ted wanted their first single to be someone else's tune.
Yeah, but I think still even that one, it's Van Halen-ized. We did it our way.
What would you have picked as the first single? Maybe Jamie's Crying. You know, just because it was our own.
I was told that they were going to play it like at 2 o'clock in the morning on KMET 94.7. And I stayed up, had a little clock radio, and I heard it. And I ran to your room, Al, we're on the radio! And it's still the same. Every time I hear us on the radio, it's the same thrill, excitement. It's like, I still feel like a little kid, like, wow, we're really on the radio.
How old were you when you got your first guitar? 12, 13, 12. And that first one was Castle Del Rey.
4 pickup Sears model. Cost, it's 70, 80 bucks. But great.
I used to think, man, the more pickups, the better. I played at the 6th grade, last day of school talent show with that original guitar. It's like 3 times the size.
I remember one of the very first guitars that I went and bought was in a place called Lafayette. It's kind of like a Radio Shack. And they had a 12-string guitar. I liked the guitar, but I didn't want 12 strings. I wanted 6. So I asked the guy, hey, can I take 6 strings off and try it? The guy goes, no. I'm going, well, why not? He said, if you buy it, you can do whatever you want. So I bought it, took 6 strings off, and loved it. And that was my very, very first successful attempt at changing something that was considered standard to my liking.
I used to have a little gold top Les Paul.
The real reason why I started making my own guitars is because a Les Paul, to me, was just the cliched rock and roll guitar. I mean, I liked the sound, but it didn't fit my bod. I'd have to wear it too high to be able to stretch as I do, and it looks funky. And then you start looking like Al Di Meola instead of Jimmy Page.
What I wanted was that type of sound, but with a tremolo.
I have 2 Les Paul Juniors, single cutaway and double cutaway junior, kind of a reddish, it's a 58.
Oh, I played a Flying V too.
You did?
Yeah, back before we got signed.
I was playing a 335 for a while in the band before we got signed, which is a 63 Sunburst one. It sounded fine with the band. Come on, like Roy Orbison. That was actually my main experimental guitar. I mean, I did everything that you could imagine to that guitar to ruin, And it's too bad because that guitar would have been worth some bucks today. But still, I ruined an expensive guitar to learn what I know now of building guitars, which I guess is worth it.
On the recording of the first album, I actually used the Ibanez Destroyer for a lot. All the stuff that doesn't have any kind of vibrato on it is that. Like You Really Got Me, got a rhythm track with Jamie's Crying, and on Fire too. It's one of the few guitars made out of Carina wood, that you could get without spending an arm and a leg. It's just a great sounding guitar. Until I took a chunk out of it to make it look nice, to make it look different,
The one which I call my shark guitar, it looks great. It still sounds good too, but it's lost the tonality that I want.
It's on the cover of Learn Children First, it's missing a piece.
I mean, nobody taught me how to do guitar work. When I picked up a lot of good guitars that way.
A lot of what I do is really trial and error. I do know where I want to get. The guitar that I wanted to play did not exist. It was that simple.
What I really loved about a Fender guitar was the vibrato bar, except they only came with single coil pickups, which at high volume, they squeal and they're very thin sounding.
I bought a 58 Strat years ago and we played a high school dance and Dave and Al just turned at me. I swear to God, Al threw a stick at me. He said, don't use that guitar, you know, it sounds too thin.
And there's the other company, Gibson, that made a Les Paul, which made humbucking pickups, which canceled the hum and has a much fatter sound.
What I wanted was to cross between a Gibson and a Fender. The humbucking sound was a vibrato. What I wanted to do was fall off the edge of buildings, you know.
Then I bought a 61, but the 61 was the one that I put a double pole humbucking into, and it got close, got very close. You know, all of a sudden the band said, that's okay.
That's when I realized, hey, this is neat.
I wasn't looking for anything to please other people. There's just nothing was out there that I wanted.
You know, I wanted to be my guitar, an extension of myself.
So I proceeded to find a company that made knockoff bodies and necks.
A company called Charvel.
I heard about them that they made exact duplicates of any Fender guitar, but out of nicer wood.
There's actually Boogie Bodies who supplied Charvel with the body and the neck. And I go out there, they were out, you know, San Dimas way, and said, how much for a body? He goes, oh, you don't want one of those. I go, why not? The guy goes, they're seconds. I'm going, I thought he meant those are next to be made. No, what he meant was those are junk. We can't sell those because they have knots and you know, they're damaged. I said, great, I'll take one.
That's what I'm really into doing, actually, is to squeeze anything out of the cheapest possible thing.
So I bought a $50 body and $75 neck, and I proceeded to take a chisel and a hammer and make a hole big enough for a Gibson pickup. And of course, that pickup had to come out of a guitar somewhere. So I ruined that guitar by ripping the pickup out, but I knew I was on to something.
I took all the vibrato tailkeys out of the old Strat.
I just, you know, picked up the body and the neck and slapped it together.
A Stratocaster actually has 3 pickups, and everything was unsoldered and just laying there. And I had no clue how to hook it back up. So I wondered if it would work if I just hooked the humbucking pickup straight up to one knob. And it worked.
That's what's so funny, you know? I mean, everything I do is simple.
And that's what ended up being that guitar.
You remember the first time when the guitar was done and you plugged it in and...
Yeah, I thought it was me. It's like, you can't buy one of these. I felt like I was on to something. And obviously I was. It had no finish. It was like a junk wooden body.
I'm sitting there with a blank piece of wood with a guitar, and it sounded great and did everything I wanted. And I painted it black, and I'm going, this looks kind of boring.
The black and white stripes, which was on the first Van Halen record, I don't know what made me think of that at all.
And there's some tape laying there, and I just started taping it up. I took a razor blade and just cut pieces out and spray painted it white, and then took it all off. And I'm going, hey, this is kind of cool.
It's like pretty much everything I do, it's kind of a mistake.
And because Charvel started, you know, copying him, I said, man, I better change it. So what I did is I really went to town painting and all freaked out.
So later on, the red guitar is the same guitar as the white one. Taped over it again and spray painted it red.
I used Schwinn bicycle paint, acrylic wax. Oh, it's good paint.
Every time I look at it, I go, God, I wish I would have left it black and white. It took on a life of its own.
Crossing a Gibson with a Fender was out of necessity because there was no guitar on the market that did what I wanted.
You notice an old picture had a Gibson sticker on, and I don't know where I got that sticker, but that was the perfect thing because what I was trying to do was cross-pollinate a Gibson with a Fender. It was kind of a
culmination of years of putzing around, and everything kind of ended up in this guitar.
You know, I'm just a punk kid trying to get a sound out of a guitar that I couldn't off the rack, so I built one myself, and now everyone else wants one.
Some people call it Frankenstein. I call it my baby.